A beautiful, injured Apache woman was found by a cowboy she expected to be enslaved. But he offered. The early morning sun had just begun to spread its golden light across the dry, empty plains. The wind whispered softly through the tall grasses, carrying with it the faint smell of dust and earth. A lone cowboy rode along a winding dirt path, his horse moving steadily under him. He was a man used to solitude. His face, weathered by years under the hot sun, carried both strength and quiet sadness. He had long ago learned that the world could be harsh, but he had also learned patience and careful observation. As he guided his horse along the trail, something in the distance caught his eye. A small, twisted figure lay near the edge of a dry creek. At first, he thought it might be a pile of branches or a tumbleweed, but as he drew closer, he realized it was a person. Something about the way the figure moved, or rather did not move, made his heart tighten with concern. He slowed his horse, careful not to startle whatever it was. When he came closer, he saw her clearly. She was a woman, young, with dark hair tangled and matted from travel and hardship. Her clothes were torn, and one of her legs was bent unnaturally. Her face was streaked with dirt and blood, and her eyes, wide and fearful, darted toward him immediately. The woman's first thought was fear. She had been taught since childhood to fear white men. Her people, the Apache, had faced countless attacks, betrayals, and horrors at the hands of strangers. She knew all too well what it meant to be captured or enslaved. Her body trembled as the cowboy dismounted slowly, his movements calm and deliberate. She drew in a shaky breath and tried to crawl backward, but her injured ankle made it impossible. The cowboy stopped several feet away. He did not raise his hands aggressively. He did not demand that she come closer. Instead, he spoke in a soft voice, careful to be gentle. "Hey, it's okay. I won't hurt you." The woman's eyes narrowed. His words sounded strange, almost too calm to be true. No one had ever spoken to her this way. They had always shouted, grabbed, or threatened. She wanted to speak, to warn him to leave, to flee, but her throat was dry, her body weak. She tried to push herself backward, but the pain in her leg made her wince. She could not escape, and for the first time in days she felt completely helpless. The cowboy noticed her fear and kept his distance. He reached slowly into his bag and pulled out a small canteen of water. "Here," he said, holding it out. "Drink, you need it." She froze. Her mind raced. Was this a trick? Could she trust him? Her people had always taught her to expect the worst. But her body was weak from hunger and exhaustion, and the pain in her ankle screamed for relief. Slowly, cautiously, she reached out and took the canteen with trembling hands. She drank, the cool water soothing her parched throat, and for a moment she just stared at him, unsure what to do next. The cowboy did not move closer. He watched her carefully as if he could read her thoughts. He understood fear because he had known it himself. "I'm not going to hurt you," he repeated. "You're safe. You just need to rest." Rest. The word sounded strange to her. Rest meant safety, and safety was a concept she had almost forgotten. Her mind went back to the memories she had been running from, the raids on her village, the screams of her family, the nights she had spent hiding, hoping to survive. She had thought herself alone in the world with no one to help her. And yet here was this stranger offering care without force or threat. Her eyes filled with tears, but she quickly blinked them away. Tears were dangerous. Showing weakness could invite attack. She did not understand why this man was different, why he offered her help without asking for anything in return. Still, the pain in her ankle was too great and her body was too weak. She could not stay where she was. She tried to move again, attempting to stand, but a sharp cry escaped her lips when the pain shot through her leg. She collapsed back into the dust, feeling hopeless. The cowboy did not rush. He came closer but slowly, making sure she could see every step. He knelt beside her and looked into her eyes. "I can help you," he said softly. "I have a place nearby where you can rest and I can fix your leg." She shook her head violently. "No, I don't, I can't." Her words were broken, filled with fear. She wanted to escape, but she could not. Her body would not obey her mind. The cowboy nodded, understanding. "I won't force you, but you can't stay here. You'll die if you try." She looked at him, measuring his words against his calm demeanor. Could anyone really speak like that and mean it? Could anyone care without expecting something in return? Her mind screamed at her to run, to hide, to fight, but her body betrayed her. Her strength was gone. Finally, trembling, she nodded slightly. The cowboy smiled, but not in a way that mocked her. It was gentle, kind, and patient. He extended his hand to her, not to grab, but to guide. Slowly, she placed her hand in his and with his support managed to stand. Every step was agony, but he stayed beside her, supporting her without crowding her. They moved together through the dust and wind, the cowboy's horse following closely. The sun climbed higher, warming the plain, but also highlighting the harshness of the land. He could see that she was scared of every sound, the creak of branches, the flutter of birds, even the whisper of the wind. She flinched at every movement, expecting danger. He understood. He had seen fear before. He did not push her, only walked beside her, speaking softly, describing what they were doing so she would not feel trapped. After a long, slow journey, they reached a small cabin tucked behind a cluster of trees. The cabin was simple, made of weathered wood, but it offered shade and shelter. The cowboy led her inside and gently guided her to a cot covered with clean blankets. She sank onto it, exhausted. The pain in her ankle throbbed sharply, but the relief of being somewhere safe gave her a strange, heavy comfort. The cowboy knelt beside her again. "I'll fix your ankle," he said. "Just let me help." She shook her head. Why are you helping me? I don't belong here." I'm nothing to you." He looked at her for a long moment, his eyes steady. "Everyone deserves help. Everyone deserves a chance. You're not nothing." Her chest tightened. No one had ever said anything like that to her. Her life had been filled with fear, with loss, with people who saw her as weak or as an enemy. And yet here was a man who saw her as human, real, important. She did not answer. Words failed her. Instead, she let herself lie back, feeling the weight of exhaustion pull her toward sleep. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to relax just slightly under his careful watch. The cowboy stepped back, giving her space, but stayed in the room, ready to act if needed. As the sun rose higher, she drifted in and out of sleep, haunted by dreams of running, of being chased, of being alone. But in the back of her mind there was something new, something she had not felt in a long time, a tiny spark of hope. She wondered what this man's intentions truly were. She did not trust easily, and she knew that fear was her shield. But for now she could rest, she could heal, and she could, if only for a moment, believe that not everyone in the world wanted to harm her. And so, in that quiet cabin, surrounded by the sounds of wind through trees and the soft creak of the floorboards, a fragile bond began to form. One built not on force or fear, but on patience, kindness, and the faintest glimmer of trust. The first day passed slowly, each hour marked by small gestures of care. The cowboy brought her water and food, speaking softly. He did not touch her without consent, never hovered too close, never made her feel trapped. Every action was careful, deliberate, and respectful. She watched him, learning his ways, and slowly, just slowly, she began to breathe more easily. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to hope. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the small windows of the cabin, painting warm patterns on the wooden floor. The woman stirred, blinking against the brightness. Her body ached in new ways, her ankle throbbed, her muscles were stiff, and even her hands felt weak from the journey. She had slept more than she realized, a heavy, dream-filled sleep that carried fragments of her past and fears of the future. When she opened her eyes fully, she noticed the cowboy across the room, quietly tending to the small fire. He had a gentle way about him, moving carefully, making sure she could see everything he did. He didn't speak at first, just glanced at her and gave a small nod. She flinched slightly, unsure if he had been watching her while she slept. His calm presence, however, made it clear he meant no harm. "Good morning," he said softly, his voice low but steady. "You slept well," she hesitated, unsure how to respond. The words stuck in her throat. I think so," she murmured. He nodded and set a small bowl of porridge on a table near her cot. "Eat. You need strength for today." Her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten properly in days. Hunger had been a constant companion, sharp and gnawing, reminding her of the dangers outside. She looked at the food with suspicion. Was it poisoned? Was this a trick? She remembered the stories her people had told her about strangers who promised help but only brought pain. Yet she could not deny that her body was weak. Slowly, trembling slightly, she reached for the bowl. She picked up the spoon, tasting the porridge carefully. Warm, simple, nourishing. It was nothing like the meager scraps she had survived on for days, and yet it filled her with a quiet, unfamiliar comfort. The cowboy sat across from her, watching without pressing. He did not rush her, did not insist. Instead, he simply waited, offering a silent understanding that words could not capture. She found herself looking at him, noticing the lines on his face, the way his eyes held both strength and kindness. He was different from anyone she had ever known. Once she had eaten, she tried to stand, testing her injured ankle. Pain shot through her leg, sharp and insistent, forcing her to sink back onto the cot. She bit her lip to keep from crying out. The cowboy moved closer, gently taking her hand in his. "Let me help," he said softly. "I can fix it so you can walk without pain." She shook her head quickly. "No, I can manage. I don't need your help." He nodded, understanding. He did not argue. Instead, he produced a small bundle of cloths and clean water. "I'll make it better," he said simply. "It won't hurt much, I promise." Her fear returned instantly. She had never allowed anyone to touch her wounds before. Every touch had been pain, force, or betrayal. Yet she could see the patience in his eyes, the care in his hands. Slowly, hesitantly, she extended her leg. The cowboy worked carefully, cleaning the wound and wrapping it gently. He spoke all the while, explaining what he was doing so she would not feel trapped or helpless. By the time he finished, her leg was supported, less painful and wrapped securely. She looked at him, a mixture of relief and confusion in her eyes. Why are you helping me?" she asked again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because it's the right thing to do," he replied simply. "No one deserves to suffer if I can help them." The words were strange to her but comforting. She did not know how to respond. For days, perhaps weeks, she had expected only cruelty from others. To hear someone say this and mean it was almost unbelievable. The morning passed slowly. She sat by the window, gazing at the dry plain stretching endlessly before her, while the cowboy went about small chores, feeding the horse, repairing a small fence, collecting water. She watched him, learning that his world was simple, grounded, and honest. Each small action carried a purpose, and each movement was careful and deliberate. Despite her lingering fear, curiosity began to grow. She asked him questions, hesitantly at first. "Why do you live alone?" He paused, leaning on a wooden post, his eyes on the horizon. "I lost my family a long time ago. People I loved, people I trusted. I decided it was safer to be alone. But I learned that even alone you can help someone. You can make a difference." The woman listened quietly, feeling the weight of his words. Loss was something she understood too well. Her people had been attacked, scattered, and hunted. She had lost family, friends, and her sense of safety. And yet, here was this man, telling her that loss did not mean one had to become cruel or indifferent. Hours passed and the sun climbed higher. She moved slowly, testing her leg again. The pain was still there but manageable with the support he had given her. She discovered that small tasks, fetching water from a nearby bucket, helping to tend the small fire, or sweeping the floor, gave her a strange sense of purpose. She realized that she could contribute, even in her weakened state. The cowboy watched her without interference, offering guidance only when necessary. His patience was remarkable. He did not rush her, did not criticize, did not treat her as helpless. Instead, he treated her as a human being, flawed, injured, but capable. Each small gesture, each respectful interaction, chipped away at the wall of fear she had built around herself. That evening, as the sky turned soft shades of orange and pink, she ventured outside for the first time since the morning. The wind brushed against her face, carrying scents of earth, grass, and distant water. The plains stretched far beyond her vision, a reminder of both freedom and danger. She looked down at her wrapped ankle and realized that, for the first time in days, she felt strong enough to walk without immediate fear of collapse. The cowboy walked beside her, his presence steadying. "You're doing well," he said quietly. "You're stronger than you think." She wanted to argue, to say she was not strong, but the truth pressed against her chest. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps she had survived all she had endured because of some inner strength she had not recognized. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was hope. Night fell and the cabin became quiet. The woman lay on the cot, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts a mixture of fear, wonder, and confusion. She had expected the worst from every encounter with strangers. She had believed that anyone who approached her would either harm her or take something from her. Yet, here she was, alive, unchained, cared for, and respected. She did not understand it, and yet, for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe in kindness. The cowboy tended the fire one last time before resting nearby, careful to stay within sight but not crowd her. His presence was a silent promise. He would not harm her, he would not force her, he would not betray her. The woman closed her eyes, exhaustion overtaking her once more, and drifted into a dreamless sleep. In the darkness, she felt a flicker of trust. Small, fragile, and easily broken, but real. She thought of her people, of the dangers still waiting in the world, and yet she felt something new stirring inside her, a feeling she could not name, but knew she wanted to protect. When morning came, the woman woke with determination. She did not yet trust completely, but she was no longer paralyzed by fear. She began to understand that safety could exist in the world, that not everyone was cruel, that perhaps, for the first time in her life, she had a choice. The cowboy greeted her with the same calm smile. "Good morning," he said. "Ready to start today?" She nodded slowly. "Yes," she replied, surprising herself. She was ready not because the world had changed, but because someone had shown her that even in a harsh, unforgiving land, kindness could survive. And perhaps she could survive it too. Days passed slowly in the quiet cabin. The injured Apache woman was healing, though every movement still reminded her of the fragility of her body. Each step she took was careful, her leg wrapped securely, and she leaned lightly on the cowboy whenever she needed support. At first, she had been wary of his kindness, unsure if any act of help came without expectation or danger. But now she had begun to notice a pattern, a patient consistency that she had never experienced before. The cowboy rose before dawn each day, preparing small meals, checking the cabin, and tending to his horse. He never demanded anything from her, never criticized her inability to move quickly, and never pressed her to speak. She found herself watching him, fascinated by his quiet routine. He seemed to move with a calm purpose, each motion deliberate and thoughtful. She realized that this steadiness made her feel safe in a way that words alone could not convey. One morning, she mustered the courage to speak. "Why do you live here alone?" she asked softly, her voice hesitant. She was still wary, but curiosity had begun to outweigh fear. He paused, looking out at the distant plains before answering. "I had a family once," he said quietly. "I lost them a long time ago, people I loved, people I trusted. It was easier to live alone than to face that pain again." His voice trembled slightly, though he tried to hide it. "But living alone doesn't mean I stopped caring. It just makes me careful, patient." The woman remained silent, listening. She understood loss. She had seen her village attacked, her family scattered, and her people hunted. Fear and grief had been constant companions for her entire life. Yet here was a man, a stranger, telling her that loss did not require cruelty, that one could choose kindness even after pain. The day moved slowly. She tried small tasks, fetching water from the nearby well, helping him feed the horse, and sweeping the cabin floor. Each task was a small victory, proof that her body could recover, that she could contribute. The cowboy observed silently, only guiding when necessary. He never criticized, never rushed her, and never treated her as helpless. With each small action, her fear of him decreased, replaced by a quiet, cautious trust. As they worked side by side, the woman began to share fragments of her story. She spoke of the raids, the nights she had hidden, the pain of losing family, and the loneliness that followed. She spoke in broken sentences, careful to keep her words measured as though each one had to be earned. The cowboy listened without interrupting, never judging, never questioning the truth of her words. He offered no pity, only understanding, and that alone was a revelation to her. In return, the cowboy shared pieces of his past. He spoke of the family he had lost, of mistakes made and opportunities missed, and of the loneliness that had become his companion. His voice carried no bitterness, only acceptance. The woman realized that even people who had suffered greatly could still choose to be gentle, still choose to help. The days grew longer, and the woman began to feel stronger. She walked more easily, her ankle healing with each careful step. She began to help more around the cabin, learning small tasks like chopping firewood and tending the horse. The cowboy taught her with patience, never showing frustration, always encouraging her to try again if she failed. One afternoon, while they were outside mending a small fence, the woman noticed movement in the distance. Her body tensed instinctively, her mind racing through possibilities: danger, soldiers, raiders, someone who would bring harm. She froze, unsure if she should hide or run. The cowboy noticed her sudden tension and looked in the same direction. "It's all right," he said calmly, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "There's nothing to fear. It's just a group of travelers passing by. They won't come here." Her body relaxed slightly, though her heart still raced. She realized that she had been living in constant fear for so long that even harmless movement could trigger panic. The cowboy's calm presence was a shield, protecting her not just from danger, but from the fear that had ruled her life. That evening they sat by the fire, the sky painted in hues of orange and purple. The woman felt a strange sense of belonging, something she had not experienced in years. She realized that she had come to rely on the cowboy's presence, not just for protection but for comfort. "Do you ever get lonely?" she asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. He looked at her, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But I've learned that loneliness isn't always bad. It gives you time to think, time to understand what really matters. And when you meet someone worth trusting, it's worth the risk." The woman considered his words carefully. Trust was not something she gave easily. Her life had taught her to expect betrayal, pain, and loss at every turn. Yet here she was, feeling the first stirrings of trust towards someone who had done nothing but show her patience and care. Days turned into a week, and the woman's strength returned. She could move more freely, help more effectively, and even laugh softly at small moments. The cowboy's presence was no longer just a source of safety. It had become a part of her daily life, a constant she had begun to rely on. One morning, she ventured further outside, testing the limits of her healed leg. The plains stretched endlessly before her, beautiful and harsh at the same time. She realized how long it had been since she had felt the sun on her face without fear, without running for her life. The cowboy watched her carefully, ready to assist if she stumbled, but he did not interfere. He had taught her well, and he trusted her to take small steps on her own. Seeing her move freely brought a quiet satisfaction to him. He had helped her regain not just her physical strength, but a measure of confidence that had been buried under fear for too long. That afternoon, while fetching water from a nearby stream, she heard voices. Soldiers. Her heart leapt into her throat. Memories of raids and captures flooded back and her body froze. She wanted to run, to hide, to disappear into the grass. The cowboy appeared at her side instantly, placing a steady hand on her back. "Stay calm," he whispered. "They don't know you're here. We'll be careful." Her trust in him was absolute in that moment. She did not argue, did not panic. She let him guide her silently back toward the cabin, keeping low and moving slowly. Her body was tense, every muscle ready to flee, but his presence gave her courage. Once inside, he quickly secured the cabin and ensured she was out of sight from any prying eyes. The soldiers passed by without noticing them, their voices fading into the distance. The woman's hands shook as she processed what had just happened. She had expected to be captured, enslaved, or harmed, yet she remained safe. The cowboy looked at her, calm and steady. "You see," he said softly, "even danger can be faced without giving up. You survived today because you stayed calm, because you trusted me. That's strength." She nodded, tears threatening to spill over. For the first time, she realized that trust could be more powerful than fear. That kindness could be stronger than cruelty. That even in a harsh, unforgiving world, she could find safety without losing her freedom. That night, as the stars filled the sky, she sat by the fire with the cowboy. The warmth of the flames, the quiet crackling of the fire, and the steady presence of the man beside her brought a sense of peace she had not known in years. She felt a fragile hope blooming inside her. Perhaps there were people in the world who were good, who could be trusted, who would protect without expecting anything in return. As sleep overtook her, she thought about the days ahead. The world outside the cabin was still dangerous, still uncertain. But she no longer felt alone. She had someone who had shown her that survival did not mean sacrificing humanity, that safety did not require chains, and that trust could be given and earned slowly, carefully, and without fear. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that she could heal, not just her body but her heart. And perhaps, with time, she could learn to live again, to hope again, and to trust again. The days continued quietly at the cabin, but a sense of tension lingered in the air. The woman had healed well, and she could move freely now, her ankle fully supported. She had begun to help more with daily chores, fetching water, tending the fire, and even feeding the horse. Each small task reminded her that she was not helpless and that she could contribute in some way. Yet, even with her growing strength, a shadow of fear remained in the back of her mind. One morning, the sound of distant voices reached her ears. At first, she thought it was the wind, but then she heard it clearly, the sound of men approaching, their horses' hooves thudding against the dry earth. Her body froze instantly. Memories of raids, captures, and loss surged forward, and her chest tightened with fear. She looked to the cowboy, her eyes wide and pleading. He noticed her panic immediately but remained calm. He moved closer, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "It's okay," he said softly. "We will be careful. Just stay calm and do exactly as I say." Her trust in him had grown over the past days, and now it became her anchor. She nodded silently, swallowing the lump in her throat. Her heart raced, but she did not run. She allowed him to guide her as they quickly but quietly moved toward the back of the cabin, away from the windows. The men outside were soldiers, riding in a small group, asking questions to the passing travelers. They were searching the area, likely looking for any Apache survivors. Her chest tightened with dread. If they discovered her, she knew the consequences could be severe. Yet the cowboy moved with calm assurance, giving her instructions in whispers, guiding her to stay low and keeping her out of sight. The soldiers stopped near the cabin, dismounting to examine the surrounding land. Their voices carried clearly in the morning air, but they did not enter the cabin. The cowboy had prepared for this possibility. He had hidden supplies and ensured there was no evidence of her presence outside. Slowly, quietly, they waited, each second stretching endlessly. The woman's hands shook as she held her breath. Every sound, the crunch of gravel under a horse's hoof, the rustle of grass, made her heart leap. She wanted to flee, to hide, to disappear entirely, but the cowboy's calm presence kept her rooted. He whispered instructions, reminding her to stay still, to breathe slowly, to focus on the sounds around them. Hours seemed to pass as they waited, the soldiers inspecting the area and then finally moving on. The sound of their horses faded, leaving the plains silent once more. The woman exhaled, a deep, shaky breath, feeling both relief and exhaustion. She realized that she had survived this encounter without panic, without giving up. She had followed the cowboy's guidance and trusted his experience. The cowboy looked at her, his expression calm but serious. "You did well," he said quietly. "You stayed calm, followed instructions, and trusted me. That's bravery, not just survival." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. For the first time, she understood that strength was not only physical, it was courage, patience, and trust. She had faced real danger and had survived, not by running blindly, but by listening, observing, and acting carefully. The incident left her thoughtful for the rest of the day. She realized that the world outside was still dangerous, still unpredictable, and that she would have to remain cautious. Yet, she also recognized the difference between fear and trust. Fear could paralyze her, but trust in the cowboy and her own abilities, gave her strength she had never known. That evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in deep oranges and purples, the cowboy prepared a small meal. He moved quietly, allowing her to sit nearby, watching him without interference. She had begun to feel comfortable in his presence, realizing that he never sought to control her, never demanded obedience, and never treated her as weak. His patience was steady and his actions spoke louder than words. "You have a choice," he said suddenly, breaking the silence. "You can stay here with me safe until it is safe to return to your people, or you can leave now and try to return to them on your own." The woman's heart skipped a beat. She had expected no choice. She had always believed that survival meant following orders, obeying others, or being taken wherever someone else decided. The very idea of having a choice was both frightening and freeing. I don't know," she whispered, her voice uncertain. I have never been allowed to choose," he nodded. "I understand, that's why I'm giving you the choice. You are free to decide. No one can force you, no one can take you from this cabin. You have control over your own life here." The woman sat quietly, absorbing his words. She thought of the dangers outside, of the soldiers she had just avoided, and of the risks she would face if she returned to her people. She thought of the kindness he had shown, the patience he had offered, and the trust he had earned. Slowly, she realized that she did not have to choose between fear and survival. She could choose safety, dignity, and respect. For the first time in her life, she felt the weight of real freedom. It was not just the absence of chains, but the ability to make her own decisions. She could decide her own path, and for the first time, that thought filled her with hope. The night grew darker, and the stars appeared in the sky, twinkling like distant lights of possibility. She sat by the fire, reflecting on the events of the day. The soldiers had passed, leaving them unharmed, but the encounter had reminded her that danger was never far away. Yet she no longer felt helpless. She had survived by trusting, by being cautious, and by relying on the guidance of someone who genuinely cared for her well-being. The cowboy joined her, sitting quietly without speaking. The silence between them was comfortable, a shared understanding that words were not always necessary. He had taught her many lessons over the past days, lessons of patience, of courage, and of trust. He had shown her that kindness could exist even in a harsh world, and that survival did not require cruelty or submission. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but firm. I want to stay," she said, looking into his eyes. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Because you've shown me that I can be safe and still be free." He nodded, a small smile appearing on his face. "Then stay. You are safe here. You will always have a choice and you will always have respect." The woman felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of belonging, not forced, not imposed, but freely given. She realized that she had survived not just through caution, but through trust, courage, and careful choices. She had discovered that even in a world full of danger, there could be people who offered protection without expectation, kindness without demand, and freedom without chains. As the fire crackled and the night deepened, she thought about the days ahead. She knew there would still be challenges, still be uncertainties, and still be risks. But she also knew that she was no longer alone. She had someone beside her who valued her not as property, not as a burden, but as a human being. And that knowledge, simple and profound, gave her strength she had never known before. Sleep came slowly that night, but it was peaceful. She lay on her cot, feeling the warmth of the fire and the quiet presence of the cowboy nearby. For the first time, she allowed herself to hope, not just for survival, but for life, for choice, and for the possibility of trust. The next morning, the world felt a little less frightening, a little more promising. She moved freely, helping with small tasks, tending to the cabin and the horse, and learning more about the rhythms of life in this safe, quiet place. Each day was a reminder that courage was not just about facing danger, but also about trusting, choosing, and accepting help when it was offered. The woman realized that her life was changing. She had expected chains, captivity, and fear. Instead, she had found safety, patience, and freedom. And she had learned that the greatest strength was not in fleeing danger or hiding from the world, but in trusting, choosing, and embracing the kindness that others could offer. The cowboy watched her quietly, noting the changes in her demeanor. She was no longer the frightened, fragile woman he had found days ago. She was stronger, wiser, and more confident. He knew that she was beginning to trust not just him, but herself. And he knew that, with time, she would find a place in this world where she could heal fully, both in body and in spirit. As the sun rose higher, they continued their work together, side by side in quiet companionship. The woman had chosen to stay, and in doing so, she had discovered a strength she had never imagined. She had faced fear, survived danger, and learned to trust. And in that trust, she had found freedom, the freedom to heal, to choose, and to live again. The morning sun rose over the quiet plains, casting a golden glow across the cabin and the surrounding land. The woman stirred, stretching slowly, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. She was fully healed now. Her ankle no longer throbbed, her muscles were strong again, and she could walk, run, and move freely without pain. The transformation felt not only physical but emotional. She had grown in courage, trust, and self-belief, and the days of fear that had once dominated her life felt like distant shadows. She stepped outside, taking a deep breath of the crisp morning air. The plains stretched endlessly before her, dry and beautiful in their harsh simplicity. Her eyes scanned the horizon, seeing the land not as a place of danger, but as a world full of possibilities. For the first time, she felt truly free. Not just physically, but in her mind, her heart, and her choices. The cowboy appeared beside her quietly, as he always did. He had risen early to tend to the horse and prepare for the day, but he had paused to watch her take in the beauty of the morning. "You're moving well," he said softly, smiling. "It looks like the land agrees with you." She smiled back, a genuine, unguarded smile. I feel stronger," she admitted. "Not just my leg, but me. I feel stronger here with you and in this place." He nodded, a sense of satisfaction in his eyes. "That's good, you've earned it. You've survived, healed, and learned to trust yourself and me. That is real strength." The woman looked at him, realizing how far she had come. She had expected chains, fear, and control when she first opened her eyes in his cabin. Instead, She had found patience, kindness, and respect. He had never forced her, never judged her, never treated her as anything less than a person. She understood now that trust and freedom were far more powerful than fear and control. Over the following days, life in the cabin settled into a quiet rhythm. The woman helped with chores, cared for the horse, and began to explore the surrounding plains carefully. Each day brought small victories, a step farther along a trail, a task completed without assistance, a new sense of confidence in herself. The cowboy remained a constant presence, watching her with quiet approval, offering guidance only when necessary. He never took control from her. He allowed her to make her own choices, supporting her rather than directing her. One afternoon, as they sat together by the stream collecting water, she spoke softly. "I never thought I could have this. Safety, respect. Someone who cares without expecting anything." Her voice trembled slightly, though it was not fear this time. It was wonder, amazement, and gratitude all at once. The cowboy looked at her, understanding completely. "It's rare," he admitted, "but it exists. And it doesn't require chains or fear to work. Kindness, patience, and respect, these are the strongest tools we have." She nodded, feeling the truth of his words deep in her chest. She realized that her survival had not been about running or hiding. It had been about trusting, learning, and embracing the guidance and care that had been offered to her. She had discovered a new kind of strength, one that came not from fear, but from hope and choice. As days turned into weeks, their bond grew stronger. They worked side by side, shared stories of their pasts, and learned to understand each other's hearts. The woman began to laugh more, her smiles becoming brighter, her movements lighter. The cowboy, too, seemed to carry a lighter heart, finding purpose and satisfaction in helping her heal and watching her grow. One morning, the woman stood at the edge of the plains, looking toward the horizon. She thought about her people, about the dangers they had faced, and about the life she had led before meeting the cowboy. She had expected captivity, enslavement, or harm from anyone who approached. Instead, she had been given choice, safety, and respect. She felt gratitude that went deeper than words could express. The cowboy joined her, standing quietly beside her as they watched the sun climb higher. "You're ready now," he said softly, "to make any choice you want. Stay, leave, or explore. It's your decision." She looked at him, feeling the weight and freedom of that choice. For the first time in her life, she understood what it truly meant to be free, not just from physical danger, but from fear, control, and the expectations of others. She did not have to flee, hide, or obey. She could choose her own path. I want to stay," she said finally, her voice clear and steady. "Not because I have to, but because I want to. Because I am safe, I am respected, and I can be myself here." The cowboy smiled, a warmth in his eyes that spoke of relief, pride, and quiet happiness. "Then stay," he said simply. "You are safe, free, and valued. That will never change." In the days that followed, life continued peacefully. The woman fully embraced her freedom, her strength, and her new life. She explored the surrounding land, learning its rhythms, observing the wildlife, and tending to small tasks around the cabin. She laughed more freely, moved more confidently, and spoke with a voice that had once been silenced by fear. The cowboy continued his careful watch, offering help when needed, teaching her skills to navigate the land and sharing quiet moments of conversation. Their bond deepened naturally, rooted not in control or possession, but in mutual respect, understanding, and trust. Each shared task, each quiet moment, and each gesture of kindness strengthened their connection. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deep shades of red and purple, they sat together outside the cabin. The woman felt a sense of completion she had never known. She had survived the worst the world could offer, healed from her injuries, and discovered a place where she could thrive. She had chosen safety, trust, and dignity, and in return she had received them fully. The cowboy broke the silence gently. "You see, life can be harsh, yes. but it can also be kind. And sometimes it's the kindness that saves us, not just survival instincts or strength. She nodded, looking at him with a mixture of gratitude and admiration. You saved me, not just from danger but from fear itself. He smiled softly. No one saves anyone completely. We give each other chances. We give each other trust and respect. And when someone chooses to embrace it, they save themselves too. She thought about those words, realizing how true they were. She had survived before, yes, but now she had thrived. She had chosen to trust, to heal, and to grow. She had chosen to stay, not as a captive, not as a dependent, but as a free, respected human being. Weeks turned into months, and their quiet life continued. The cabin became a place of healing, safety, and learning. She regained confidence in herself and her abilities, tending to the land, caring for the horse, and even assisting the cowboy with tasks that once would have seemed impossible. Each day reinforced her freedom and her choice. The woman often reflected on her past, on the fears and dangers she had faced. She realized that the life she had been forced to endure had shaped her resilience, her courage, and her survival instincts. But it was the kindness, patience, and respect offered by the cowboy that had transformed her life completely. It had given her the space to heal, the freedom to choose, and the trust to embrace a life that she had never imagined could exist. One crisp morning she stood on the porch looking out at the vast plains. The wind carried the scent of earth and grass, and the sun illuminated the world in golden light. She felt a deep sense of peace. She had faced danger, uncertainty, and fear. She had survived, healed, and chosen her own path. And now she felt a quiet joy she had never known before, a sense of belonging, freedom, and self-respect. The cowboy joined her silently, standing beside her as they watched the world awaken. For the first time, the woman realized that she had not only been offered protection and kindness, but had been given something far more valuable, the ability to live fully, freely, and with dignity. She turned to him, smiling. "Thank you for everything. For showing me that safety, trust, and freedom are possible." He looked at her, eyes reflecting the warmth of the morning sun. "You didn't just accept it, you earned it, and you've grown stronger than you know. That is your gift to yourself." In that quiet moment, surrounded by the endless plains and the soft whispers of the wind, the woman felt complete. She had expected chains and captivity. Instead, she had been offered freedom, trust, and respect. She had survived the worst, embraced kindness, and chosen a life of dignity. And in that choice, she discovered the most powerful truth of all. Freedom is not given, it is claimed. And trust, once given and honored, can heal even the deepest wounds.